welcome to this gouache painting tutorial. Today we'll walk through this dark ocean night sky scenery with this big moon as the centerpiece. I haven't done a night sky tutorial in a while, so I thought it was about time, and I think this is definitely one of those paintings that's perfect for any experience levels. So even if you are a complete beginner with gouache, I think this might be a very good first painting to try out. But let's get started right away. So here are all the brushes I'm gonna use today. We're gonna start off with this bigger flat brush and then switch to some smaller round brushes. But before that, let's do a very quick pencil sketch. Pretty much all we need to figure out before getting started is the horizon line. So where do you want your sky and ocean to meet? So I drew this line here, maybe a little bit above the center line, and then I roughly sketched the size of the moon here. There are many different elements that you could add to this picture. For example, there could be some clouds on the sky or some waves in the ocean. You could also add some shoreline to the lower part of the painting. But I decided to create something very simple today and keep this picture a little bit more minimalistic. But after we have some guidelines in place, it's time to take out the paints and finally start the painting process. So here are all the colors I'm gonna use, and you can probably guess that we are mainly gonna use some dark blue tones. I wanted to mix a good amount of black and a little bit of yellow ochre to our Prussian blue shade, so that the tone of the blue in this painting would be very muted and almost grayish. But again, here there are so many different options. For example, you could go for a little bit more purple or violet tone for this painting, or you could mix a little bit more green in there and create more of a turquoise effect. So there are many options, and this is definitely not the only color combination. But after we have some paints on the palette, we're gonna start by creating the whole background first. I wanted to create a small gradient effect with the colors, and I think even if you feel like you struggle with gradients with gouache paints, a painting like this might be very good to practice that, since all our colors are very dark. The differences between the tones is not that noticeable. So even if there are small streaks here and there, it doesn't really matter that much. But anyway, I started with this pretty much straight black that I applied to the very top and bottom of this painting. And then we will mix a little bit lighter tone. I was testing out different tones here, and eventually I ended up adding a little bit of white into our dark mixture. And it did exactly what I needed to lighten the tone a little bit. So I'm just swiping back and forward, and I'm also using pretty hefty amount of paint here. So especially if you come from watercolors, I think the amount of gouache paints you need to use might come as a surprise at first. I know, at least for me, it definitely took some time to get used to that. So I'm just trying to make sure that every single part here is covered. And then if there are some areas that don't look super smooth or where the color difference is a little bit harsh, you can always take a little bit of more water to your brush and kind of go over those areas again, which will kind of smooth out the paints a little bit and blend them together much more. I was trying to leave this small line here in the middle, so that there will be some indication of where the ocean starts. We're definitely gonna add a little bit more color to this later, but I think doing this will definitely make a difference in the final result. But now that the whole background is successfully covered, we're gonna let the whole area dry completely before moving on. So next it was time to add some stars to the sky, and I'm gonna use a very easy and quick method to add stars here, which is kind of my go-to technique when painting night skies. So I'm gonna cover the lower half of the painting and then take this small brush that I'm gonna dip into white paint and then into water. And then by using another paintbrush or a pen or something like that, we're gonna tap this brush, which will make the white paint kind of splatter all over the painting. So as you can see, this will create very fine, unsymmetrical dots all across the sky, which is exactly what we want when painting a night sky. And then you can always go over and maybe add a few bigger stars here and there, and maybe fill some areas if they didn't get covered that well. So now that we have the night sky ready, the next step is painting the moon. This was probably the most difficult step for me in this whole painting, and I was struggling a little bit because I didn't know which color I wanted to make the moon. So I'm gonna start here with this yellowish brown color, which might look a little bit weird at first. My initial idea was to make the moon a little bit more yellow toned, so this brown paint could work very well as the shadow color for that. But eventually you can see that this color will pretty much be covered by all the other shades I added on top, which is one of the good things about gouache paints. If there's a color or area that you don't like in the beginning, you can always go over it and take the painting into a whole new direction. Anyway, so I was slowly trying to add some highlights and shadows here and mainly create some texture to create the moon surface. It might be helpful to look at some reference pictures of moons so you kind of get a better idea of how to place the shadows and highlights. And don't be afraid to experiment with a little bit different colors here and there. I definitely wanted this picture to have some of that yellowish tone to contrast with all the blue tones in the background. So even if you end up creating a little bit more white and blue tone moon, there can still be a few dots and places where you can kind of see that yellowish tone peeking through. And I think adding some small color accents like that will always make your paintings a little bit more dimensional and interesting. I also tried to add this small halo around the moon, which is not the easiest thing to do with gouache paints for sure. So I tried to use this mixture of mainly water and just a small amount of white paint that will create this very light color that will mainly dry to the background. And while it's not probably the best halo out there, I think if you look at it from a small distance, it kind of still looks okay and adds the effect that we want. But then when the moon finally had enough of these dark and light spots and texture, we're finally ready to finish the ocean and paint the moon reflection on it. So this was something that I really wanted to show up from this picture. And again, I didn't want to only use white color here. So I think you will see that I was using a pretty good amount of yellow here again, because I just personally think that it looks really nice against the grayish blue background. So we are starting very slowly and creating this reflection line by line. You can also switch it up a little bit, so it doesn't have to be completely smooth all across the painting. I tried to add some areas here where the lines skip a little bit more, so maybe there are some more wavy parts in the ocean where the reflection looks a little bit different than some of the smoother parts. I think this is also a very interesting point about painting an ocean, because there's usually a lot of color variation, a lot of lights and shadows, and overall there are so many ways to capture that in a painting. At some point, I also started to add some shadow lines to the rest of the ocean. So I think it looked a little bit too smooth for me to be water. So I wanted to add some little strokes of darker paint here and there. You can also add some darkness to the reflection area, and then just continue with the small yellow and white highlights. But after you're happy with your reflection and the amount of shadows and variation in the ocean, we're finally done with this whole painting. So now it's just time to remove all the tapes and reveal our beautiful final painting. I really hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial, and if you're one of those people who have been asking more night sky tutorials, I hope you're satisfied with this. If you decide to paint this at home, let me know how it went for you. I always love to hear your comments and see your recreations. It always means so much. Also, if you want to see even more monthly tutorials from me, you can check out my Patreon, where I post an extra tutorial every month with some additional benefits as well. But I guess that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!